let me introduce myself. I'm Paola Prendini. I'm a postdoc fellow of Wits, and I've just arrived like 1 month now. So they invited me to chair this session, and I'm very glad to be able to do it. It's a great honor to be here with you during the whole conference. We are going to start by watching the teaser that we've prepared about this very special achievement of this very much special group. So please, let's have a look.
It's the first crime against humanity. The crime to ever classify and invent superiorities and invent inferiorities.
I mean, much has been written on the question of the zone of non-being, spaces where certain human lives don't matter to the same degree as the zone of being. So I'm thinking about how this contributes to or speaks to the sort of the ordinariness of violence.
And actually, one thinks it's obvious, but when you start to think about it, it's not actually. This idea that society actually doesn't mind losing certain people.
Society, as it is organized now, produces what Walter Mignolo has called dispensable bare lives. Lives that society can do without.
Visibility of disability, right, which is recognizing and celebrating the lived experiences of everyone.
We live in a very ableist society, and a non-disabled person myself, there's always this inherent assumption, which is
would define themselves in a good way that is, but when people know you, they will say, yes, you are African, but you're not this stereotypical African that we know.
Many white South Africans particularly would want to shrug off that past.
There's something I find almost offensive when white people use words like carry the burden of the past,
totally.
Because like you are not the one carrying any burden. Like being privileged, being born into privilege, that is not a burden.
What is it that you have internalized that will make you accept the rape and the victimization of the 5-year-old son in comparison to the relationship, the same-sex relationship?
Sexual violence by a woman is not taken to be violence of the same order as sexual violence by a man.
And it makes it very useful as a strategy if you want to convince somebody that an object or an individual or entire social group is a disgusting and should be avoided.
This speaking subject says, in my disgust of same-sex intimate relationships, I'm willing to forgive a rape of a minor.
Shed light on the intersex perspective. It's very difficult to sort of fit into the social standards of what a male or what a female is supposed to look and be like.
It's just so easy to then see how when you binarize or dichotomize something that actually has a huge range of diversity, it only results in exclusion and violence.
This myth around fairness in sport, that only certain differences would make a huge difference here, that because you're intersex, no one is investigating height, differences in sort of muscle composition, but it seems to be the central point of debate is because you're intersex, you can't participate in this sport.
The irony of surveillance is, if this is such a fact of nature, why do you have to put so much energy into policing and surveilling and checking up if it really is this thing? You are...
It's the first crime against humanity. The crime to ever classify and invent superiorities.
Okay, there you go. Thank you very much. So as you could notice, we have so many important themes that have been discussed already, like along this series of podcasts. Unfortunately, we could not have all of the participants here, yeah, to be part of this conversation. But obviously, as you can see, yeah, as you could see from the video, these other people are around. So please, you are also welcome to join us, yes, from where you are. But our idea is just to motivate you, yes, to really engage in watching those episodes. We have, like, the first one is already available on our social network. We will also add here to the screen our QR code, so you can use your phones and take a picture of it, like go there on the camera and read this QR code that is already here on the screen. And by that, you will also be able to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And doing that, you will be updated by the next episodes once they are launched, yes, there. So I would like to start here with my first questions with Professor Melissa. I would like to know, how do you feel like about having this new project, yes, as part of the group activities, and what were your expectations around that, and how do you see the importance of doing it at WiCDS, please?
So, one of the objectives of my chair is to attempt to be an interface between the academic work that we do in diversity studies and our society, and to create materials that can be used more widely than just, teaching our students. As important as that is, we want to have a lot more impact if possible. So this project really is part of that ambition, that desire to create materials that can be used, either within the academy or by people who doing facilitation workshops or whatever, and they need, some sort of trigger to stimulate discussion, either to agree with things that are said by those of us in the podcast, or perhaps to disagree, to challenge, to make more nuanced. But the idea is really to stimulate discussion, to be there as a trigger. That's how we envision this. And we quite deliberately resisted any attempts for us to have a facilitator or a chair of the discussion or something like that, preferring for us. You'll see that in each of these podcasts, we've got some conversation, some extract from a previous WiCDS event, or vox pop at a previous WiCDS event, and we just we use that as a trigger for our own conversation. So we sort of see it as these widening circles of, how do we start small conversations, and can they get bigger? And we hope they do get bigger. But we really wanted to have it just to be a spontaneous, honest to goodness conversation that we had. And I have to share this with you, that one of the fun things, and one of the things that I think I really can say on behalf of the people who are affiliated with WiCDS, is that one of the things that we really enjoy is good conversation. And I know Jamie mentioned our reading group and how lively our discussions can get. And so another thing that motivated this was that we thought, these discussions are really interesting. We should actually start recording us, just having a discussion, not a rehearsed question answer, but just reacting to each other and bouncing off each other, riffing off each other, and thinking together. I think that's the important thing. It's the thinking together. So that's what we wanted to share. And if you ask me about what my hopes are or our hopes are, I really will confine it to what I've already said, which is you don't have expectations per such, but we do have hopes that what we've done will turn out to be useful to other people.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Melissa. I think I can already jump to William, and we have already recorded 5 episodes regarding the like how do we see humanity nowadays. We also discuss whiteness, yeah, queer identity, gender, violence, among many other themes there. How was the decision-making process to get to those topics, like to decide what were the topics that would be chosen to be part of the podcast? And could you please share how was that? Like, what was the making of of this process, please?
Oh, thank you very much, Paula. I think the idea of these critical conversations was generated in the WiCDS class lecture rooms, reading groups, and other conversations. And I think Melissa is right to suggest that what we got to do here was actually an expansion of what we do almost daily at the center, which is the core learning and the core teaching that we do with our students and other interlocutors that get to populate our space, including such a conference as this one, the distinguished lectures, WiCDS Wednesdays, and other conversation opportunities that we circulate. And I think it's relevant for me to say that we were, without really announcing it, deploying our critical diversity literacy theory and philosophy of liberation to critique empire. Like the conversation on humanity was really a conversation that critically looked at what happened to the human subject when conquest took place, because it is in conquest that human differences came to be criminalized. When one province of the world decided that it was going to be the center of the world, and when one type of human being was tempted to decide that it was the human being and others were the other. That's one of the principal crimes of conquest. And when we came to the subject of whiteness, I think we engaged with whiteness as white supremacy, which is the ideology that became the oxygen of colonization, imperialism, enslavement, and other violences of empire. Yeah, we did come to questions around queer being and queer identity. And those questions, we came to them because our philosophy and our theory compels us to look at those positionalities that have come to be in the receiving end of the power, the privilege, and the violence of empire. So to close it up, I think what we're doing here, as Melissa suggested, is just a snippet of the kind of questions that we ask and the kind of questions that we attempt to answer at the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies, especially including our students that we co-teach with and that we co-learn with. So I think we were really being our intellectual and activist selves in capturing these conversations that we are witnessing today. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, William. So, Rudo, tell me, in your view, in your perspective, do you agree that this podcast series might be a useful tool in terms of like media education, a media education tool, a media education initiative? Do you consider podcasting a useful language and useful medium in terms of that, like in terms of achieving those purposes that we have in the center?
Thank you for the question, Paula. I do believe that these podcasts, I think just to repeat what Melissa and William have been saying, we sort of use them as a way of bringing theory into life, right? Into real life and in a very accessible way. Just yesterday, here at the conference outside, there was a conference participant who said to me, I'm an undergrad student and this conference is so inaccessible, you know, the language and everything, you know, it's just a lot for me to understand. And then I was like, I got to thinking about the podcast actually in that situation, because I thought, you know, there's a lot of people out there who will think, you know, I can't go to a conference. It's such an academic space. I can't read an academic article. Like the languaging is just too much for me. But almost everyone is willing to give a podcast a chance. Almost everyone is willing to be like, okay, it's a podcast. The language is probably going to be okay. Let me do 5 minutes, right? Let me try it. Let me give it a chance, which is why we also made these episodes quite short, 20 minutes, 25 minutes at most, you know, so that we don't bore you. But also so that we keep the audience engaged and we keep them listening to something that's, you know, accessible. Like I said, you know, these days with social media, and now that we're putting it on our social media pages, you know, we believe it will reach a lot of people, and a lot of people will be able to learn from these podcasts, or at least be able to use them to further the conversations.
Yes, exactly. I think it's a very good way of expanding our bubble. Yes, because usually academia is a sort of a very difficult bubble to access, yeah, for the like the general public, the general society. In this and taking this into consideration, Pumzile, do you believe that, like, do you agree with that? Like, do you think that this process of doing the podcast achieved this kind of possibility, yes, of like breaking the bubble, but also do you feel that you have learned with the process? Could you share maybe some lessons that were learned during it, mainly for the academic area where we are, the academic field?
Well, it's quite interesting because I met Melissa in 2012 with True Haley, and I got to know a bit about what diversity studies is about. What are they doing? And this is the year actually diversity studies started at Wits, and so when I got involved as producer slash director for this podcast, with Melissa's blessings, I
I got to spend a lot of time watching the previous videos. And as I'm watching and I'm thinking, what kind of, I mean, imagine you watching for 2 hours and you're thinking, what is that one topic I want to get out of these 2 hours, which I will make one episode out of just that one topic. And it took me back to my early days of journalism when I started working at 702 radio in the newsroom, where you will be interviewing a politician, you ask them one question, and they go on for like 30 minutes or an hour, and you're only looking for that one cut of actuality, which you will play for 40 minutes or 30 minutes during the news, during the news on the hour. So it was kind of like in reverse for me, because now I'm sitting and I'm listening. And so I learned a lot because I got to watch a lot of videos, previous videos from diversity studies, the conferences, the debates, the talks, a lot of things that diversity studies does, and through that process. So, and then I would choose these different topics, you know, from each video that I'm watching. And then I would come to the team at diversity studies and propose that these are the topics. And fortunately, it was very easy working with diversity studies because, I mean, there were no, I don't remember of any topic that was rejected by the team. You know? So, which kind of created a very good relationship. And then one of the challenges was, how are we going to have these discussions without a facilitator, without a person chairing? So we had to find a way of seamlessly direct the conversation without even seeing that there is someone facilitating. So it was quite interesting. I mean, I learned also that diversity studies is a kind of a transformation department. There's a lot of transformation issues. There's a lot of issues that are being discussed, which people don't really normally think about. There's a lot of critical thinking involved, and I loved all of that. And I'm still learning and growing. And I wish these episodes can just keep going to infinity. Thank you.
Yes, great. Yeah, I also had the same feeling like when I watched the episode, because I'm also a journalist, yes, myself, and I really felt, and I was very happy to see this counter-hegemonic or even decolonial approach, you know, you used like for the process of making the conversation happen, you know, because usually, yes, you need like what I'm doing here, yes, the facilitator to make it happen, but there you showed that it was not necessarily, you know, something that needed to be imposed, yeah, and we are able to talk and to promote dialogical perspectives even without a facilitator, yeah, and it happens very well. So yeah, it's very interesting to see that too. I would say, I don't know if you would like to add anything that maybe came to your minds afterwards, like after you had already spoken. Anything to add? No. What about Jamie, Katya, Jamil, Kudzai? You were also part of this process. So I don't know if you would like to add something here to our discussion. Do you feel represented here? Yes, please, Kudzai. Yeah, it's true. But the only thing here is that we have timing, yes, against us. But yeah, okay. Thank you very much. That's why I'm reminding about it.
Thank you, Paula. Yeah, I think mine is just a brief input and also just expressing the excitement to see this live. I think from my end, what was particularly interesting is sort of the realization of how we think we really know so much about a topic until we have to really sort of talk about it. and really the case study approach, I mean, for lack of a better term, but having a scenario and discussing it, I think it really challenges one's perspective on issues, and also really thinking, I mean, this whole idea of rehearsed academic talk and to then just having it in conversation format really also brought in a considerable amount of vulnerability for all participants. But I think it's that kind of vulnerability that's creative and very productive, that it wasn't a knowing contest or a typical academic a debating field or defense of my thesis field, but it was one of those approaches which really exposed and created a level ground for all of the participants. So then it had nothing to do with the fact that, oh, I've worked in this area for like a decade or for how many years. It was really then about thinking collectively and bouncing ideas off each other, which I think really just shows that the sort of linear learning approach, or the idea that one person can produce knowledge for all, really got decentered. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed in participating in the conversations.
Thank you very much. Yes, we can actually define it as a research methodology too. Yes, like producing a podcast requires a lot of research. Yeah, even though we are not specialists on everything, obviously, but yeah, it's something that is there. Yeah, it's part of the process. All right, so I would invite us now to watch at least like around 10 minutes of the first episode so that you can have an idea of what we are offering you from now on. The first episode is entitled, What Does It Mean to Be Human? And I don't know if like people that are online, if you feel like sending questions to, please feel free to do it. When we finish here this first 10 minutes, I'll go back to the audience that is here in person and also our chat in order to give you also the chance to engage into this conversation. So yes, please, let's watch episode 1, the first 10 minutes of it.
It's the first crime against humanity. The crime to ever classify and invent superiorities and invent inferiorities.
I mean, much has been written on the question of the zone of non-being, spaces where certain human lives don't matter to the same degree as the zone of being. So I'm thinking about how this contributes to or speaks to the sort of the ordinariness of violence.
And actually, one thinks it's obvious, but when you start to think about it, it's not actually.
So the first question is pretty obvious. If you're going to dehumanize people, then the response has to be, what in the world is a human being? What is a human being? All right? If somebody walked up to many of you and said, hey, yo, you're not a human being. Well, your initial response might be to say, what are you talking about? I'm as human as you are. But if you were to do that, you would have lost. And the reason is, should you make those who set as a standard racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, dehumanization, should they stand as the standard of your humanity? So you may say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be the standard.
I think that's a very interesting question from Prof. Lewis Gordon. Like the question of what it means to be human is a very important question for current times. But I think a simple answer for me would be to his question would be, I'm a human and I identify as such. But I think William and Melissa you obviously have more around what makes the differences of which other humans are worth more than others. Yeah.
Yes, could I also think it's a fascinating question, and actually one thinks it's obvious, but when you start to think about it, it's not actually all that easy to answer. I think I would paraphrase the question into something like, what does it mean to treat someone like a human? You know, and then for me, a lot of that has to do with recognizing the fullness of a person's subjectivity, the fullness, their full emotional being, their full psychological being, their full capacity for feeling pain and suffering. And, you know, recognizing all of that and treating the person with a respect for all those capacities. And it also, in my opinion, I think more and more about this, is that to treat a person as a human is also to recognize their capacity for change and growth. Because I think a large part of what happens when we don't recognize the humanity of others is that we box them in or fix them within a particular way of thinking about them, which is what Prof. Gordon also talks about. When dominant, powerful people fix other people in terms of our understandings of them, and we don't allow the capacity for people to become, rather than just simply to be what we understand them to be, or want them to be understood to be.
Yeah. And another thing that comes to mind while you were speaking is the question of naming. So you're talking about boxing, and I think from my end, the question of being human speaks to how do we name people? How do we name bodies that we consider to be human? So in different contexts, for example, when we talk about the question of dehumanization or the process of dehumanization or that particular exercise in spaces where genocide has taken place, we tend to find that quite a lot of names have been given to groups of people so that they can sort of be unhuman, or what we predominantly know as dehumanization. So I'm thinking about, in the case of South Africa and immigration, when xenophobic violence was at its peak, and also in pockets of xenophobic violence, the use of the name Kwere Kwere to refer to immigrants, and also if you think about the Zimbabwean case, the Gukura Hundi, where the Shona armies, or the ZANU-PF led armies killed the Ndebele, that there were also names such as roaches and attributed to the Ndebele. So I'm also thinking about how it also, to some degree, there's some sort of animalization of the other. And of course, we can talk further about the binary of the human and the animal, but that predominant assumption that if you name someone non-human, then you can begin to justify their dehumanization.
Right. I mean, for me, that's really right at the heart of what we're talking about, that binary. Because what makes us think, if we're saying you can't treat humans like animals, and if you name humans as animals, that you've then sort of got permission to maltreat them. What makes us think that it's okay to treat animals like that? To me, that is the big question that arises, is why would we not recognize animals in their fullness of being? Their capacity for feeling, their capacity for suffering, their desire to live, their willingness to.
Okay, as I said, we won't have time enough, unfortunately, to watch the full episode, but it's already available on our YouTube channel. So I invite you, yes, to watch it for full, yes, whenever possible. We are also launching the next episodes every Thursday evening from 6 p.m. They will be available until November 14th. We are having new episodes premiered. And we also invite you to check out if you haven't, our social media. Yes, we are on Instagram, on Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. And you can also get some updates around the podcast and some other activities that we have been doing at the center through those social media. As I promised before, I don't know if you have like who is with us online and the audience that is here in person, if you would like to comment or maybe make a quick question, because we are a bit like late now according to our program. Yes. Yes, we have 5 episodes recorded. Yeah, so that's why they will be there. That's a very good question. So please, he's asking if it will continue afterwards.
So I'm retiring at the end of this year, in 2 months' time. So I can't really say what's going to be happening in the future, but I certainly think of this as season 1. And I do really hope that our team will go on doing this next year and the year after.
Once a month or once in 2 weeks, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. But if
Right.
it continued, because I told you I'm already thinking about sort of embedding them into my assignments for my students, because my courses are manifestly talking about critical diversity studies, and what could be better than, because I've already worked with podcasts and I know that students love them. Even in academia they love more accessible language, to be honest, so let
True,
alone
hey?
outside academia, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's really true. And actually, Mustafa, that is very happy making.
Okay.
To hear that you want to use it.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, of course. Why not? I mean, you did the hard job, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful podcast. And my brother, Dr. Mofuli, was speaking. He said something to the effect that we have to teach and learn together with our students. And I'm also, like Mustafa, actually imagining this as part of my module that I'm currently coming up with, decolonizing communication studies. And at the heart of it is the coloniality of power, of human and knowledge. And it's quite an important sort of play, this podcast, that is, it's quite an important sort of resource center, especially for our students. What I wanted to find out is coming back to learning together with our students and teaching together with them. Is there a possibility and space for learning together with the community and teaching together with the community, in terms of the community being part of the podcast? I watched online when we were giving awards to young people for poetry, and looking at the art at the back, I think it was done by young people again. What will it mean to have those young people coming to a podcast discussing issues around sexuality, issues around race? And I was discussing with Chris and my friends here, what do our children think about us? You know, Nonhlanhlan's child was Googling how to shut up, how to, what is it? Not to shut up grandma as such, but how to make grandma stop asking us a lot of questions. Yeah, she's Googling that, a young 8-year-old is Googling that. And it is quite important to, yeah, how to mute grandma or something like that, right? And if you think about it, these young people have deep thoughts about the world, deep thoughts about their existence. And I'm thinking we shouldn't only theorize about these issues from there, but have a conversation with them also. And what more if you put this into course material, bring a sort of well-rounded up world for our students. And definitely this is going to form part of my decoloniality, decolonial of communication studies module, and we wish it goes on
If Melissa retires and goes with the money, then we have to look for the money elsewhere.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't know if we have any other questions. Otherwise, I'll just go back to them. Oh, no, maybe not. Okay. Let me.
No, a podcast has become all the rage these days, and for good reasons, right? And I use them like, while driving and things like that. Even my brother, like he's doctoral in musicology, he was talking about having a podcast. So it's a great idea, right? So I know this is a hard thing to do, right? But don't give up. Well, why not? Like when you can't have a conversation, why not, for instance, there's so many renowned or other renowned and also really great scholars elsewhere who might really just be looking for an opportunity to be heard, right? In critical diversity studies. Maybe you can give them a theme, like put the hard job in their shoulder, basically divide it, right? And then have a conversation with them for 20 minutes. And you tell them, we want the language to be accessible, just like all of these podcasters, successful podcasters do, right? They mostly invite other people, but then with some themes, and I'm sure you know what to do. But anyways, it just occurred to me, right? Yeah. So you don't have to do it all yourself, so you get tired. And
yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Just to riff off of what Mustafa just said, there are a couple of us speakers here you could easily bring in and rope in if you wish. Quite happy to, share the joy.
Please, it's recorded, you see? So we'll go back to it.
I'm just saying.
Thank you very much in advance. And okay, so I don't know whom of you would like to answer to Professor's Umpofu question. I think he really brought something important here, which is that like students and in general, yes, they are native learners. They are digital native people, yes, and we are here opening a possibility of getting in touch with them. So how do you see it? I don't know who can start.
Well, all I want to say is that I'm quite happy. I think for me, this is like a very rewarding moment for me because we've traveled a very long journey with this podcast. And I'm really appreciative of the feedback that I'm getting from our audience here. And I'm very thankful to everyone who participated in this. Jamie, Katia, Jamil, Melissa, Rudo, Kutai, and Uncle William, and other participants who are not part of WiCDS that you will see in other episodes who gave their time. And I like your suggestion of the podcast even when you're driving. Maybe we should consider doing some audio version of what we've already recorded. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I think it's a very brilliant idea you came up with. And unfortunately, we won't credit you, Prof. Mustafa.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Prof. Mpofu, for that recognition of the method and your commitment to expanding and applying the work that we're attempting there. What I want to lend emphasis to will be the C before diversity studies. We set out to do critical diversity studies, a large part of which is to critique other mainstream approaches to diversity studies, is to ask questions about the questions that are asked in diversity studies. So we take pride in the C of our critical, and I think our students have contributed a lot, not just to the conversations that we are discharging, but also in keeping us on our toes about some of these questions and all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for taking part here, and congratulations to the whole group for such great process and also a special achievement that we have. I think now we are really like getting to the last panel. So I'm going to already pass the mic here to Professor Melissa so that she can.
Can I just ask what the time is? Okay, so we do have a little bit of time for William to just field some comments, thoughts, suggestions from you before we formally close. But William, 5 o'clock on the dot, we're going to close because we've been so good with our timekeeping the last 3 days. We can't possibly break with the tradition.
Okay. Yeah, my work is the enjoyable part of provoking interaction amongst us concerning the entire conference that we've just had from day one up to this moment. So I'm inviting colleagues to make their contributions. It can be a question, a comment, a suggestion, or any form of contribution to the work that we are doing together. Yeah. There's my colleague there. I'm coming over, Hamish. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, William, and thank you to the broader WiCDS team for a really, really incredible conference experience. I've gone from one last week into another one this week. Our department hosted our conference and festival. So I thought I'd be a lemon squeezed of all my juice, but I found moments of being really sort of raised and inspired, both in thought and in discussions. Just want to acknowledge that. I've been in and out because of office responsibilities, but I think one thing that really has sat with me and was landed, I think, today quite strongly was this idea of this, and perhaps now being at the point of analysis around the humorist. I think as one presenter referred to, I think it may have been your presentation, the humorist and the target. And I think we've kind of really sort of rabbit-holed really nicely to this point, because I think in the first day we had the opening of the trickster and a sort of really challenging, diverse, disruptive presentation around the trickster and notions of the trickster, and from different reference points and cultural reference points of the trickster. And I've been sitting with that because I thought it was a really genius move to start off with that on a conference around ridicule and humor and risk and social justice and so on and so forth. The trickster is such an interesting character that is cross-cultural and cross-continental. And so I thought that was a really good sort of move to make. And it kicked up a lot of questions. And then I think, as was mentioned today by another presenter as well, that there's been perhaps an emphasis on the reception of the humor, the impact of the humor, but perhaps a movement towards now that fine human interaction where there is a humorist or a deliverer and the receiver or receivers becomes a very interesting point of interrogation, because beyond just the sort of semiotics, beyond the levels of hegemonic alignment, disagreement, challenge, and so on and so forth, I think one of the things, and particularly from the field that I come from, which is very, very much sitting in performance, and performance really pulling the researchers and practitioners to interrogate that idea of the interaction, the live moment, moving away from the theoretical and risking the actual live experience. I'm sitting with that as a question to go, so what does this offer us now as colleagues going to our various spaces? Yes, there's the need and should be the celebrating of collaboration and connection. But I think as a particular question that's coming from the content and range of content of this conference, that's something I'm sitting with, is there's something very interesting potentially for me, just heart beating around how that moment is understood from different theoretical perspectives, but also from different cultural perspectives, and then ultimately to the goal or the intention of the use of humor. I think there's been very interesting conversations around, but for me, it pulled me back to that. Is what has all of this said about that point? Because something that we grappled with earlier this year in our department was who should be present. Because we had last year a couple of students who joined our program who were very disruptive and in terms of our pedagogy, challenged our pedagogy. A lot of times people say, oh, that's healthy, that's how it should be. But it was destructive. And I think it was something that we really grappled with was, you know, what does it mean to have maybe not hegemonic, but core or central ideas, themes, ethoses that underpin our work that sometimes we are unconscious to, things that we value in our thought and practice and research and outputs. And what happens when that comes into our space, and sometimes through humor. And then what does that do to us, to our work, to where it should land and locate?
Yeah, and thank you, Hamish, for not just your submissions now, but a very collaborative act of coming with your students, Drama for Life, and giving us that powerful performance that we got yesterday. And in answer maybe to your question, I think the important thing is to pick it up from here and take it even to other higher levels. Thank you so much. Jamil?
William just wants me to speak, so I will speak. I think, I suppose this is a little bit more of a, I suppose, organizational, technical point about the conference this year. I think, yeah, I've really enjoyed the caliber of keynotes this year. I think it you know, the keynotes of a conference really do lay a very important foundation for proceedings and frame the interactions in very important ways that either lead us to a place where we can say that I think we've achieved what we want to do or close to what we want to do with this conference, or we haven't, you know. And like this conference and many others, this was actually something I wanted to say in relation to the podcast, was I think what it allows us to do, which is something I think we do or should be committing to in the academy, is to be constantly taking opportunities to play and play with and revise our vocabulary, the vocabularies that we use to theorize and illuminate the issues that we are critiquing, right? And so I feel like when we talk about the podcast and doing different versions of it, more versions of it, better versions of it, I really think we can think about that as expanding opportunities for us to revise our vocabularies that allow us to communicate our ideas better and better over time. And so, yeah, I have to say, it was quite an enjoyable experience. Thank you to everybody involved and everybody who's attended and contributed to making it the success that it has been.
Thank you so much, Jamil. We've said a lot about our students. There is Nkuli and Mercy at the back. One word.
I'm Masi. For me, throughout the conference, I was trying to relate a lot of what was being said to what I'm currently doing my research on. And just to share some of the ideas, unlike the previous speaker that we had, the point of humor, maybe the focus of humor mostly being about the intended purpose as opposed to just the laughter. And my research is around exploring what could be considered an ethical pornography. So I was thinking about that definition of humor and seeing if I could apply that to an ethical pornography and thinking maybe an ethical pornography, the focus is more the intended purpose as opposed to sexual gratification alone, considering that you can get sexual gratification from anything. I'm thinking about people who find sexual gratification from ASMR or mukbangs. So that was something fruitful from the previous keynote. But aside from that, found it very fruitful. I have a million thoughts, a million notes to reflect on and then hopefully put into my incoming research.
Thank you, Masi. Puli?
Hi, everyone. Well, I don't have much to say, but all I can say is this conference was very successful. Learned a lot from a lot of scholars, and we have actually engaged a lot regarding humor and how it applies to politics. And yeah, that's what I could say. No, thanks.
Thank you so much. Anybody else that wants to submit something? There's my colleague there.
There's another hand here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
To say one thing about the podcast, I don't think it's a good idea to look at a video of a scholar asking you a question and then you guys answer. You know, I think when you say humanity should be for the population, for the people. So when you speak, you are all in agreement of the same thing. So I wouldn't find that interesting. You know, I wouldn't say you are humanities people, but you're not speaking for the common people. You know, I think younger people asking you questions about something, or you guys discussing something more interesting. Maybe say you are discussing the death penalty or something like that, and you're speaking about what it means to be human and bring somebody else in and discuss that. But if you are there and you're using high language, looking at a video of someone, a scholar asking you about something, I don't agree with that. But it's interesting, but yeah, you should expand on who you want to include in that. Yeah.
Thank you, Thaisani. I think your gesture is to ask us to de-academicize or integrate community more and all that, which is a brilliant suggestion. There's my colleague there.
Yeah, so I'm grateful that you guys have the podcast and that you are intending it to be viewed by the whole public. Because if it's not last week, it was 2 weeks ago. At a family celebration, all life is fun, wonderful times. And then I guess my cousin, he basically had a woman feel him up because she wanted to find out, is he a man or is he a woman? And I was like, okay, that's cool. But there were other ways we could have found that out, like maybe asking instead of you feeling like you are entitled to touching somebody's body and basically trying to feel out if, you know, it's safe for you to approach them or not. And then it just arose in me like the idea that this is why we're struggling to, for example, understand why it is that women can be perpetrators of violence or sexual violence in the first place, because we never ever see them in that light. And this kind of podcast would help and shed light on that, as well as even if my cousin was a woman at the time, that doesn't make sense, but even if my cousin was a woman, she was also under the assumption that there's a possibility of her being lesbian because she's a mass presenting woman. And in that case, then we'll be like, why did you then feel so entitled to touch a queer person's body like that? You as a assumingly you as a heterosexual woman, why did you feel the right? Why did you have the authority to invade her privacy like that, to lay your hand on her? Versus if a man had done that to you, the restaurant would have had to kick you out, for example.
Thank you so much. Okay. Right. Anyone just to say something about the conference? The podcast is taking all the attention away from.
Just having a conversation. This is very important. If you do, I don't want to monopolize. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and after me, of course. Okay. No. I'm really concerned. Not these days about something. I'm not sure if it's just me or everybody's aware of this. Diversity and diversity studies and critical diversity is under attack.
Okay.
In particular, I'm not sure if you're aware of and the lies and misconceptions that are going around. I recently became familiar with a very funny term, the way it's being used on the other side, critical race theory. I'm like, what do they mean by this? And it appears that they are using it for anything related to critical theory or basically theoretical sort of criticism, what we do in literary theory, critical theory, etc. And people buy into it. They are publishing books about wokeism, and then they just go around simplifying certain things, like misrepresenting thing. For instance, reducing feminism to really just a battle between the sexes, which makes our job in a sense harder in a good way. Like I myself, for instance, I do a lot of masculinity studies. I still consider myself a learner on that path, but I feel proud that critical masculinity studies has helped me to understand feminism better. Otherwise, I would fall for such trash arguments. That's how I tell my students, hey, look, the feminism is not all about, is not a sort of simple battlefield between men and women. It's much more complex than that. As feminism is also about multiplicities among men themselves. Men can also be marginalized. Men can also be complicit with patriarchy. In a way, if we and I try to show them how all of us can benefit from gender equality, because if we as men and boys do not have vested interest in pushing for gender equality, we never do that. Why should we do that? We're like, okay, gender means women, right? That's it. But anyways, that's just an example of how we need to, I think we need to understand the other side's arguments or lack of arguments, whatever it is. I myself, honestly, I'm starting to read from them and listen to them, their podcasts. I told you I'm actually watching Gottfald's show. How does their brain work? What are they saying? What are they circulating as considered knowledge? Some of our loved ones are even trying, might fall for them, right? So it's dangerous. What they are doing is really dangerous, and I think we need to have counter arguments for them. What I'm saying is, it's unfair to say that you should do this, but honestly, I have never been in a critical diversity studies program or department, so I'm really excited about what you're doing. But places like this, I think they should also be aware of what the other side is saying and is spreading, and have counter arguments for them, serious, well-crafted counter arguments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thank you so much.
As Dr. Mustafa said, there's a conversation that we've been having. It's one of the nice things about this conference, if I may say so. It's easy to have like 5-second conversations with some experts, and you're like, yeah, your mind is already racing with ideas. If I may say so, this conference space has been one of the most convivial spaces for me to actually come in and articulate the concerns that several of us have been basically confronted with, yeah? And I'd like to actually agree with Dr. Mustafa that we need to really consider the types of misrepresentation, misreadings, the arrogance of ignorance that is coming from the other side, as has been said, because I find that the vocabularies that our disciplines of critical diversity studies, post-colonial studies, gender studies, and so on and so forth, are currently being misappropriated, misrepresented. They're being subject to very, very sort of surface readings, which are highly uninformed, no contextualization, no consciousness of colonial history and the types of neo-colonial power that is now accompanying scholarship. And this is being used actively by right-wing politics Yeah, we need to really have this on our radar. Again, this is not to like devolve the responsibility on WiCDS. I think Dr. Mustafa and myself, we are quite happy to jump in and be sort of auxiliary WiCDS members to actually continue with these conversations, because the necessity for a counter vocabulary, a counter discourse is highly important. Decades of work, good, robust scholarship, which actually works in life-affirming contexts, is suddenly being dragged through the mud, is suddenly being demonized and being used for polarizing purposes, and actually leading to new forms of dehumanization, new forms of devaluation, and new forms of utter destruction. Now, as regards, I think the colleague earlier talked about destruction of certain types of discourse. Yeah, I think that would be absolutely necessary in some cases if we are to actually envision change and actually start envisioning change, implementing change. And here, the idea of rethinking thinking, rethinking learning, rethinking teaching, rethinking researching, rethinking reading. Yeah, I think this is something which is very, very important, and not just reading alone. I mean, we've got the podcast, which is going to be an interesting exercise in a new form of listening, where language is made more accessible. And I think this is where these types of barriers have to be consistently seen, recognized, evaluated, analyzed, and torn down. Because if we do not if we do not do this, there's not going to be space for change. In order for the old trash to go out, it has to be torn down. And then we can start building anew. And this has to be a communal enterprise. Yeah, so I'm quite happy to continue with conversations, especially about the value of the critical diversity literacy principles, which have helped me in the past 6 years of my work, which, as I have tried to explain to you during the first evening, it hasn't been a picnic. Yeah, so I know, and Melissa knows this as well, there are several other sort of institutional parties in German landscapes who have embraced critical diversity literacy. So we are also quite happy to come in and chip in our bit to actually continue that sort of conversation.
Thank you so much. I like the term, the arrogance of ignorance, because it does highlight the fact that this is a kind of ignorance that is not empty, but that is loaded, and which demands that we participate in unlearning, not just learning, but also unlearning and all that. Thank you so much. Before I give the mic to Melissa, just to say that we are busy at WiCDS. Our classes start from the honors level. We have a master's cohort and a PhD cohort. So please do consider applying or encouraging colleagues to apply. We also have an accredited international journal of critical diversity studies. Please do populate that with your contributions. We do the usual articles. We have a commentary section. The commentary section is a section that allows you to reflect without being encumbered by academic codes and conventions. And then a book reviews section that allows us to converse on the publications that are done by others. We have this conference, which we hold annually, and then ongoing conversations, like on a bi-weekly basis and all that. Please, let's hear your voices, your participation, and contributions. Thank you so much, Melissa.